Some nights, you're so tired you can barely remember your own name. For Callen Durant, a single father working his second shift of the day, that's every night. He'd been delivering pizzas for 3 years, scraping by just to keep the bills paid and food on the table. On this cold October evening, rain pouring down, he made a wrong turn and ended up at an old warehouse instead of the address on his delivery slip. He climbed off his old motorbike and grabbed the pizza. What he found changed everything. The warehouse doors were wide open. Inside sat rows of luxury cars, stacks of cash reaching the ceiling, gold coins spilling from wooden crates, millions of dollars just sitting there in the shadows. Then Callen heard footsteps behind him. Someone knew he was there. Would this moment save his family or destroy them? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Some nights, you're so tired you can barely remember your own name. For Callen Durant, a single father working his second shift of the day, that's every night. He'd been delivering pizzas for 3 years, scraping by just to keep the bills paid and food on the table. On this cold October evening, rain pouring down, he made a wrong turn and ended up at an old warehouse instead of the address on his delivery slip. He climbed off his old motorbike and grabbed the pizza. What he found changed everything. The warehouse doors were wide open. Inside sat rows of luxury cars, stacks of cash reaching the ceiling, gold coins spilling from wooden crates, millions of dollars just sitting there in the shadows. Then Callen heard footsteps behind him. Someone knew he was there. Would this moment save his family or destroy them? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The day had started like every other day in Callen Durant's life, with worry knotted tight in his chest and the smell of burnt oatmeal filling his cramped apartment. He stood at the stove in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, stirring the pot, while his 8-year-old daughter Lily sat at their small kitchen table working on homework she hadn't finished the night before. "Dad, how do you spell responsible?" she asked, pencil hovering over her spelling worksheet. Collins spelled it out for her, his voice rough from exhaustion. He'd only slept 4 hours. The night shift at Marco's Pizza had run until 2 in the morning, and he'd been up again at 6 to get Lily ready for school. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a bathroom that leaked, and this kitchen-living room combination that served as their entire world. Paint peeled from the walls in strips. The radiator clanked and hissed, but never quite warmed the place properly. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza, was an eviction notice. Rent was 3 weeks overdue. Callen had been avoiding the landlord's calls, but he knew time was running out. Beside the notice was Lily's latest drawing from school, a crayon picture of the 2 of them holding hands under a smiling sun. The contrast made his throat tight. "Breakfast is ready," he said, scooping the oatmeal into 2 chipped bowls. Lily wrinkled her nose but didn't complain. She knew better. At 8 years old, she'd already learned that life was about making do with what you had. Her school uniform was patched at the knee, carefully mended by Callen's clumsy hands. Her sneakers were too small, pinching her toes, but new ones would have to wait until next month. Maybe the month after that. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing each other completely. Callen watched his daughter between bites, memorizing her face the way he did every morning, the way her dark hair fell across her forehead, the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off the playground slide 2 years ago, the gap where she'd lost her front tooth last month. She looked so much like her mother, it sometimes hurt to breathe. Zara had died 2 years ago from an illness they couldn't afford to treat properly. No insurance, no savings, just mounting medical bills and a desperate scramble to find money that never came. By the time they'd qualified for assistance, it was too late. Callen had held her hand in that hospital room and promised he'd take care of Lily no matter what. He'd kept that promise, but barely. Every day felt like drowning in slow motion. "You okay, Dad?" Lily asked, looking up at him with those perceptive brown eyes. He forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart. Come on, let's get you to the bus stop." They walked 3 blocks through the October morning, breath misting in the cold air. Callen carried her backpack because it was too heavy, stuffed with textbooks the school couldn't afford to keep in classrooms. Lily chattered about a field trip coming up, something about a science museum, and Callen made mental calculations about permission slip fees he couldn't pay. At the bus stop, other parents waited with their children. Some nodded politely at Callen. Others looked away, uncomfortable with his worn clothes and exhausted face. He'd become invisible to them over the years, just another struggling parent in a neighborhood full of people barely hanging on. "My birthday's next week," Lily said quietly, looking up at him. "I'll be 9. Callen's heart sank. He'd been dreading this conversation. "I know, honey. I haven't forgotten. I don't need anything big," she said quickly, reading his face. Maybe we could get cupcakes from the store? The ones with the frosting. We'll do something special," he promised, hating himself for the vagueness. "I promise." The school bus rumbled up to the curb, brakes squealing. Lily hugged him tight around the waist, and he held her close for a moment longer than necessary. Then she climbed aboard, waving from a window seat as the bus pulled away. Callen stood there until it disappeared around the corner, feeling the familiar weight of failure settle over his shoulders. He walked back to the apartment, passing the corner store where he used to buy Sarah flowers on Fridays, back when they'd had money for such things. Those days felt like someone else's life now. Inside the apartment, he changed into his Marco's Pizza uniform, red polo shirt with the logo, black pants, a name tag that said Callen in cheerful letters that seemed to mock his situation. His motorbike sat in the alley behind the building, a battered Honda that was older than his daughter. It started on the 3rd kick, coughing black smoke, and he headed across town to Marco's, weaving through morning traffic with the practiced ease of someone who'd made this journey 1,000 times. Marco's Pizza occupied a corner lot in a strip mall, wedged between a laundromat and a check-cashing place. The owner, Vincent Caruso, was already there when Callen arrived, prepping dough in the back kitchen. Vincent was 50-something, thick-armed and gruff, but fair in his own way. He'd given Callen a job when no one else would, and for that, Callen was grateful. "You look like hell," Vincent said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you too," Callen replied, clocking in. "Late night?" "Every night's a late night," Vincent grunted, kneading dough with practiced hands. "Got you on double shift today?" Stephanie called in sick. "That okay?" It had to be okay. Callen needed the hours. Sure, good man. The morning shift crawled by with the usual rhythm. Phone orders, online orders, the occasional walk-in customer. Callen made deliveries on his motorbike, crisscrossing the city with insulated bags strapped to the back. Most customers barely looked at him. He was just the pizza guy, as invisible as air. Tips were small or non-existent. One woman gave him exact change and closed the door in his face. Another made him wait 15 minutes while she searched for her wallet, the pizza growing cold in his hands. Around 2 in the afternoon, Stella Rivendale showed up for her shift. She was maybe 35, with tired eyes and a quick smile that suggested she understood what struggling looked like. She had 2 kids of her own, worked 2 jobs just like Callen, and never complained, even when life gave her every reason to. "How are you holding up?" she asked, tying on her apron. "I'm here," Callen said. "That counts for something." She hesitated, then added, "Listen, if you ever need anything, I know what it's like. Single parent and all." "I appreciate it," Callen said, meaning it. She nodded and went to answer the phone, and Callen felt a small measure of comfort knowing someone else understood. But comfort didn't pay rent. It didn't buy birthday cupcakes or new shoes for growing feet. It didn't fix the fact that he was one bad break away from losing everything. As the afternoon faded into evening, storm clouds gathered over the city. Callen picked up Lily from the after-school program, a free service for low-income families that kept kids safe until 6 o'clock. She ran to him across the playground, backpack bouncing, full of stories about her day. They stopped at the apartment just long enough for him to make her dinner, mac and cheese from a box, and then he walked her 3 doors down to Mrs. Holbrook's place. Mrs. Holbrook was 70-something, widowed, lonely, and happy to watch Lily in exchange for pizza that Callen brought from work. It wasn't a perfect arrangement, but it kept his daughter safe while he worked the evening shift. Lily settled in front of Mrs. Holbrook's television with her homework, and Callen kissed the top of her head. "Be good," he said. "Always am," she replied, already absorbed in her math problems. Back at Marco's, the evening rush hit hard. The storm hit just after 8 o'clock, turning the streets into rivers of dark water that reflected the city lights in fractured patterns. Rain hammered against the windows of Marco's Pizza while Callen loaded up orders for his final deliveries of the night. His uniform was already damp from earlier runs, clinging uncomfortably to his skin. "Last 3 orders," Vincent said, handing him the delivery slips. "This one's weird, though." He tapped the 3rd slip. "Big order, prepaid online, address is out in the industrial district. You know that area?" Colin studied the slip. 1847 Warehouse Road. He'd never delivered there before, but the tip was generous, $20 on top of the order. "I'll find it. Be careful out there," Vincent said. "Roads are going to be bad." Callen strapped the insulated bags to his motorbike and headed out into the storm. The first 2 deliveries went smoothly. A family in the suburbs, a young couple in an apartment building. Both times, he ran through the rain, handed over the pizzas, pocketed minimal tips, and got back on the bike with water streaming down his face. The 3rd delivery took him east, away from the familiar neighborhoods, and into the industrial district where factories and warehouses sat dark and silent. Streetlights were sparse here, many of them broken or burned out. The GPS on his phone kept glitching, the screen blurring with rainwater, despite the plastic bag he'd wrapped it in. "Turn right in 500 feet, the robotic voice announced. Callen squinted through the rain, looking for street signs. Most were missing or so rusted he couldn't read them. The buildings here all looked the same. Massive concrete structures with loading docks and chain-link fences. Numbers were worn off or never posted in the first place. He slowed the motorbike, trying to match addresses with locations. 1823, 1831, 1839. He was close. The next building should be it. He pulled up to a large warehouse with a gravel parking lot, killed the engine, and checked the address on his phone again. The GPS pin showed he was in the right place, more or less. The warehouse looked abandoned. No lights, no cars, no signs of life. But the order had been prepaid, and the address matched. Sometimes businesses operated out of strange locations. Maybe it was a night shift crew or a security guard working alone. Callen climbed off the motorbike, grabbed the 3 large pizzas from the insulated bag, and approached the building. Rain pounded against his shoulders, soaking through his uniform. His shoes squelched in puddles as he crossed the parking lot. "Pizza delivery!" he called out, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. That's when he noticed the doors. The massive rolling metal doors at the front of the warehouse stood wide open, which seemed wrong for a night like this. Rain was blowing inside, pooling on the concrete floor, and there was light, not overhead fluorescence, but something softer coming from deeper inside the building. Callen hesitated at the threshold, water dripping from his hair. "Hello, pizza delivery!" No response. He stepped inside, out of the rain, and his breath caught in his throat. The warehouse wasn't abandoned. It was full. Under the dim glow of work lights strung from the ceiling, he could see rows of luxury cars. Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, vehicles that cost more than he'd earn in 10 years. They gleamed like jewels, perfectly maintained, arranged in neat lines that stretched back into the shadows. Between the cars sat wooden pallets, and on those pallets were stacks of cash. Not small stacks, bundles upon bundles wrapped in plastic, rising waist-high in some places, shoulder-high in others. Callen took another step forward, the pizza boxes forgotten in his hands. Along the far wall were wooden crates, some opened to reveal gold coins that caught the light and threw it back in warm, honey-colored flashes. There were other things too, jewelry in velvet cases, watches displayed on stands, electronics still in their original packaging. It looked like a vault, or a dragon's hoard. Millions of dollars worth of assets, just sitting here in an abandoned warehouse with the doors wide open. His mind raced through possibilities. A storage facility for the ultra-wealthy? A movie set? Some kind of auction house? But none of that made sense. This was the industrial district. not some high-security location. And who left this kind of wealth unguarded? Callen set the pizzas down on a nearby workbench, his hands shaking. He should leave. This was none of his business. He'd made a wrong turn, delivered to the wrong address, and stumbled onto something he wasn't meant to see. But he couldn't stop staring at the cash. One of those stacks would pay his rent for a year. 2 stacks would cover Lily's birthday, her clothes, her school fees, everything she needed. He took another step forward, then another, drawn by the impossible wealth like a moth to flame. That's when he heard it. The crunch of gravel outside. Footsteps. Callen spun around, heart hammering. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the rain and the distant streetlights. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive coat that shed water like it was nothing. "You're not supposed to be here," the man said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. Callen raised his hands instinctively, pizza delivery reflexes kicking in. Customer service, non-threatening, apologetic. "I'm sorry, I'm delivering pizza. The address said 1847 Warehouse Road. I must have made a mistake." The man stepped inside, and now Callen could see his face. 50-something, handsome in a weathered way, with grey at his temples and eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Callen, then at the pizzas on the workbench, then back at Callen. "Show me the delivery slip," the man said. Callen fumbled in his pocket, pulled out the soggy paper and held it out. The man took it, studied it for a long moment, then looked around the warehouse as if seeing it through Callen's eyes. "You're the pizza driver," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. From Marco's Pizza. I'm sorry, I'll just go." "I didn't see anything. I was just—" "You saw everything," the man interrupted. "Let's not pretend otherwise." He pulled out a phone, made a call, speaking in a low voice that Callen couldn't quite hear over the rain. When he hung up, he studied Callen with an expression that might have been amusement or might have been calculation. "What's your name?" "Callen. Callen Durant." "Well, Callen Durant, you've had quite an interesting night." The man walked past him, deeper into the warehouse, and gestured for Callen to follow. "Come here. Let me show you something." Every instinct screamed at Callen to run, to get on his motorbike and disappear into the storm. But his legs moved forward anyway, following the man between the rows of luxury cars and stacks of cash. "Do you know what all this is?" the man asked. "I have no idea," Callen said honestly. "Recovered assets, acquisitions, items that belong to people who no longer need them." The man turned to face him. "My name is Sterling Voss. I'm a businessman. And you, Callen, have just stumbled into a very delicate situation." Callen's mouth went dry. "I won't tell anyone, I swear. I'll forget I ever saw this place." Sterling smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I believe you mean that. The question is whether I can take that risk." He pulled out his phone again, sent a text, then pocketed it. "Tell me about yourself, Callen. You married, kids?" The question sent ice through Callen's veins. "I have a daughter." "She's 8. "A daughter?" Sterling nodded thoughtfully. "That's good. A man with a daughter is a man with something to protect, something that keeps him honest." He walked to one of the cash pallets, ran his hand over the plastic-wrapped bundles. "How much do you make delivering pizzas?" "I don't, that's not—" "Humor me. Maybe 25,000 a year. With tips." Sterling's expression flickered with something that might have been pity. "And you're here working a double shift in a storm. Let me guess, behind on rent? Medical bills? Trying to give that little girl a life that doesn't feel like drowning?" Callen said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. "I thought so." Sterling pulled out a business card, handed it to Callen. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take those pizzas, get on your bike, and go home. Tomorrow, you're going to think about what you saw here. And the day after that, you're going to call the number on that card. Why would I do that? Because I'm going to offer you a job," Sterling said. "One that pays considerably more than delivering pizzas. One that could change your daughter's life." "I don't understand." Sterling's smile widened. "You will. Now go home, Callen Durant. And remember, you have something precious to protect. I'd hate for anything to happen to her because you made a poor decision about who to talk to." The threat was barely veiled. Cullen backed toward the door, grabbed the pizzas with shaking hands, and stumbled out into the rain. Cullen didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer against the window, turning Sterling Voss's words over and over in his mind. The business card sat on his nightstand, plain white with just a phone number printed in black. No name, no company, nothing to indicate what kind of business Sterling was really in. A job that pays considerably more than delivering pizzas, one that could change your daughter's life. But at what cost? He knew what he'd seen in that warehouse wasn't legal. Nobody kept millions in cash and luxury cars in an abandoned building unless they were hiding something. Recovered assets, Sterling had called them. Acquisitions, polite words for stolen goods probably. Or worse, and the threat, veiled but unmistakable. I'd hate for anything to happen to her because you made a poor decision about who to talk to. Callen rolled over, checked his phone. 3:30 in the morning. In a few hours, he'd need to get up, make breakfast, take Lily to school, pretend everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. He felt like he'd opened a door he couldn't close, stepped into a world he didn't understand and couldn't escape. The eviction notice flashed in his mind. 3 weeks overdue. Lily's birthday next week. Her shoes that pinched her feet. The stack of medical bills from Sarah's treatment that he'd never be able to pay. The weight of it all pressed down on his chest until he could barely breathe. He thought about Sterling's question. How much do you make delivering pizzas? 25,000 a year. And that was working himself to exhaustion. Double shifts, no days off, no life beyond survival. What would Sterling pay? 50,000, 100,000, enough to actually live instead of just exist. But he'd be a criminal. He'd be helping people who threatened children, who operated in shadows and kept warehouses full of stolen wealth. He'd be becoming the kind of person he'd always despised, someone who took shortcuts, who justified wrong choices with desperate circumstances. When morning finally came, Callen moved through his routine like a ghost. Oatmeal, spelling words. The walk to the bus stop. Lily chattered about a book she was reading, something about dragons, and he nodded in the right places, but couldn't quite focus on her words. At the bus stop, she hugged him, and he held on tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Love you, Dad," she said. "Love you too, sweetheart." The bus pulled away, and Callen stood there, Sterling's card burning a hole in his pocket. He should throw it away. He should forget the whole thing, go to work, keep struggling, keep drowning slowly, but at least drowning honestly. Instead, he found himself walking, not toward home, not toward Marco's, just walking through the morning streets as the city woke up around him. He passed the corner store, the check-cashing place, the pawn shop with its barred windows. He saw other people heading to work. Construction workers in dusty boots, nurses in scrubs, retail employees in uniform. All of them tired, all of them struggling, all of them playing by rules that seemed designed to keep them in place. His phone rang. "Vincent, where are you?" his boss asked. "Shift started 20 minutes ago. Sorry, I'll be right there." "You okay, Callen? You sound off." "Just didn't sleep well. I'm coming." He hung up and started toward Marco's, but his steps felt heavy, like walking through deep water. When he arrived, Stella was already there, prepping ingredients in the back. She looked up when he walked in, and her expression shifted from greeting to concern. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks. No, I mean it." "What happened?" Callen started to deflect, to say he was fine, but something in her eyes, that understanding that came from shared struggle, made him pause. "If someone offered you money," he said quietly, "a lot of money to do something you knew was wrong, would you do it?" Stella set down the knife she'd been using to cut vegetables. "How wrong are we talking?" "I don't know exactly, but wrong enough." She was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I've got 2 kids. Their father's gone, hasn't paid support in 3 years. I work here and I clean office buildings at night. Sometimes I'm so tired I can barely stand. And yeah, I've thought about taking shortcuts. Who hasn't?" She looked at him directly. "But here's the thing. Kids aren't stupid. They know when something's off. They know when you're lying to them, even if they don't understand what about. And I'd rather my kids see me struggling honestly than living well on something dirty." Callen nodded slowly. He knew she was right, but knowing and doing were different things. The day crawled by. Deliveries, orders, the same routine he'd done 1,000 times. But now every house he visited, every tip he received, every polite smile from a customer felt like a mockery. $5 here, $3 there, exact change from the woman who always complained the pizza was cold. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. The card at home felt like it was calling to him. That evening, after he'd picked up Lily and dropped her at Mrs. Holbrook's apartment, after he'd returned for his second shift, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Have you made your decision?" Callen stared at the screen. He should delete it, block the number, tell Vincent what happened, maybe even call the police. Instead, he typed, "I need to know what the job is." The response came immediately. "Meet me, same location, midnight." His hands shook as he read it. This was the moment. He could still walk away. He could ignore the text, go home, keep living. The life he'd been living, hard but honest, struggling but clean. But then he thought about the eviction notice, about Lily's birthday, about working until he was 70 and still not having enough, about dying the way Sarah had died, unable to afford the treatment that might have saved her. He typed one word, "Okay." The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Vincent noticed his distraction but didn't press. Stella tried to make small talk, and he responded with single syllables. When midnight approached, he told Vincent he wasn't feeling well, that he needed to head home early. Vincent waved him off with concern in his eyes. Callen rode his motorbike through the dark streets, back toward the industrial district. The storm had passed, but the pavement was still wet, reflecting streetlights in broken patterns. His heart hammered in his chest. He could still turn around. He could still choose differently. But he didn't. The warehouse appeared ahead. Doors closed now. A single light burned near the entrance. Callen parked his bike and approached on foot, every instinct screaming at him to run. A door opened before he could knock. Sterling stood there, impeccably dressed despite the late hour. "Callen, I'm glad you came. It shows wisdom." "I'm not wise," Callen said. "I'm desperate." Desperation and wisdom often look the same. Sterling gestured inside. "Come, let's talk about your future." The warehouse was different now, organized, clinical. The luxury cars were covered with tarps. The cash was locked in metal cases. Everything had the feel of a legitimate operation, which somehow made it more frightening. Sterling led him to a small office area, set up in the corner. Desk, chairs, laptop. Another person waited there, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper clothes. She didn't smile. "This is Paige Whitmore," Sterling said. "She handles operations." "Paige, this is Callen Durant." Paige studied him like he was an insect under glass. "You're smaller than I expected. Is that a problem?" Callen asked. "It's an observation." She opened a folder, scanned documents inside. Clean record, no arrests. No affiliations, no digital footprint worth mentioning. "You're invisible, which is exactly what we need." "Need for what?" Sterling sat on the edge of the desk. "You're a delivery driver. You have a job that takes you all over the city. You're familiar, non-threatening, forgettable. The kind of person who can go anywhere without raising suspicion." "You want me to deliver things," Callen said. "Packages, documents, occasionally other items." Sterling's tone was casual, like they were discussing office supplies. "Nothing dangerous. Nothing that will get you in trouble if you follow instructions. And you'll be paid $5,000 per delivery." Callen's breath caught. "5,000 per delivery," Sterling repeated. "Usually 1 to 3 deliveries per week. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Cash payment delivered to you within 24 hours of completion. No taxes, no paperwork, no questions." Callen's mind raced with the math. Even 1 delivery a week was $20,000 a month, more money than he'd ever imagined having. but his gut twisted with the knowledge that this was wrong, that he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. "What's in the packages?" he asked. "Better if you don't know," Page said. "Plausible deniability." "And if I say no?" Sterling's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Then you say no. You go home. You forget you ever met me, and you hope that your memory is as reliable as I need it to be." The threat was clear. Callen thought of Lily sleeping at Mrs. Holbrook's apartment, thought of her walking to the bus stop tomorrow morning, unaware that her father was about to become a criminal to give her a better life. He thought of Sarah in that hospital bed, holding his hand, making him promise to take care of their daughter no matter what. "First delivery is tomorrow night," Sterling said, pulling out a burner phone from his desk drawer. "You'll receive instructions via text. Follow them exactly. Don't deviate. Don't ask questions. Don't tell anyone, not your boss, not your co-workers, not your neighbor, no one." He held out the phone. Callen took the phone. The plastic felt cold in his hand, heavier than it should have been. It was just a cheap disposable cell phone, the kind you could buy at any convenience store. But holding it felt like holding evidence of his own corruption. "There's one more thing," Sterling said, his voice dropping to something quieter, almost sympathetic. "Your daughter." "Lily, is it?" The sound of her name from Sterling's mouth made Callen's stomach turn. "Don't." "I'm not threatening her," Sterling interrupted. "I'm ensuring her safety. As long as you follow instructions, as long as you keep our arrangement private, she'll never know this conversation happened. She'll just have a father who can finally afford to give her the life she deserves." He paused. "But if you talk to the police, if you try to be heroic, if you compromise this operation in any way, well, let's just say that would be unfortunate for everyone involved." Callen's hands clenched into fists. "I understand. Good." Sterling's smile returned warm and pleasant like they were old friends. "Go home, get some sleep. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, you'll receive your first instructions. Welcome to the team, Callen." The ride home was a blur. Colin's mind spun with what he'd just agreed to, the weight of the decision settling over him like a physical thing. He'd crossed the line. He was a criminal now, or would be in less than 24 hours. No going back, no undoing it. Just forward into whatever darkness waited. Mrs. Holbrook's lights were still on when he arrived. He knocked softly and she opened the door in her bathrobe, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Late night," she observed. "Work ran long. Sorry." "No trouble at all." "She's asleep on the couch." Mrs. Holbrook stepped aside so Callen could see Lily curled up under an afghan, her math book open beside her. "Sweet child." "Never complains. She's good at that," Callen said quietly. He scooped Lily up, careful not to wake her, and carried her the short distance to their apartment. She stirred slightly, nestled against his shoulder, and he felt his throat tighten. Everything he was doing, everything he was about to do, it was for her. That had to count for something. That had to make it okay. But as he tucked her into bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin, he knew it didn't. Wrong was wrong, no matter the reason. He sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, the burner phone in front of him. 2 phones now, his regular cell and this secret one. 2 lives, 2 versions of himself. The father who made oatmeal and walked his daughter to the bus stop, and the criminal who would deliver packages he couldn't afford to know about. Sleep didn't come. When morning arrived, he went through the motions. Breakfast, school bus, work. Stella noticed his exhaustion but didn't press. Vincent assigned him the usual deliveries. Everything normal, everything the same, except for the phone hidden in his jacket pocket. At 5:30 in the evening, the burner phone buzzed. Callen stepped into the alley behind Marco's and read the message. 6 p.m. Riverside Hotel parking garage, level 3, northeast corner. Package will be provided. Delivered to 2847 Ashmont Street, apartment 12B. Hand to recipient, say nothing. Text done when complete. His hands shook as he read it again. This was it. The moment of actual commitment. He could still throw the phone in a dumpster, could still walk away. But Sterling knew where Lily went to school. He knew where they lived. Walking away wasn't really an option anymore. Callen told Vincent he had a personal errand to run, that he'd be back in an hour for the evening rush. Vincent waved him off absently, focused on an oven that wasn't heating properly. Stella watched him leave with concern in her eyes, but she said nothing. The Riverside Hotel was downtown, a mid-range business place with a parking garage attached. Callen rode his motorbike up the concrete ramps to the 3rd level, his heart hammering with each turn. Northeast corner. He found the spot easily, empty except for a black sedan with tinted windows. As he approached on foot, the passenger door opened. Paige Whitmore stepped out, professional as before in dark slacks and a blazer. She held a small brown package, maybe the size of a shoebox, wrapped in plain paper. "Take this," she said without preamble. "Put it in your pizza delivery bag. The address has an actual pizza order called in. You'll pick that up from Marco's before delivery. As far as anyone knows, you're just doing your job." "What's in the package?" Callen asked. "Better you don't know. Follow instructions. Nothing more, nothing less." She held it out until he took it. The package was light. Whatever was inside didn't weigh much. "Don't open it. Don't look inside. Don't get curious. Deliver it exactly as instructed. Are we clear?" "Clear. Good." She got back in the sedan and drove away without another word. Callen stood there holding the package, feeling the weight of what he was doing settle over him. This was real. This was happening. He was about to commit a crime. Maybe not a violent one, maybe nothing that directly hurt anyone, but a crime nonetheless. He tucked the package into his jacket and rode back to Marco's. Inside, he transferred it to his pizza delivery bag, hiding it under the insulated liner. Then he checked the orders and found what Paige had mentioned: a delivery to 2847 Ashmont Street, apartment 12B, large pepperoni pizza. Already paid for online, including a generous tip. The address was in a nice neighborhood, the kind with actual trees lining the streets and buildings that didn't look like they were slowly collapsing. Callen loaded the pizza and headed out, his stomach churning with every mile. Ashmont Street was quiet, upscale, completely ordinary. He parked his motorbike and climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, with the pizza bag over his shoulder. Apartment 12B had a welcome mat and potted plants by the door. Everything looked normal, suburban, safe. Callen knocked, his other hand resting on the pizza bag where the package was hidden. The door opened. A man in his 60s stood there, well-dressed in casual clothes, with the kind of calm expression that suggested nothing ever rattled him. He looked at Callen, looked at the pizza bag, and nodded once. "Come in," he said quietly. "I'm just supposed to—" "Come in," the man repeated. Stepping aside, Callen's instinct screamed at him to run, but he stepped inside. The apartment was beautifully furnished. Leather furniture, expensive art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city. The man closed the door behind them. "The package," he said, holding out his hand. Callen opened his delivery bag, pulled out the brown package and handed it over. The man took it, set it on a side table without opening it, then pulled out his wallet. He handed Callen 5 $20 bills. "For the pizza," he said. "Keep the change." "Thank you," Callen managed. "You did well. Follow instructions like that every time, and this arrangement will work out fine for everyone." The man walked to the door and opened it. "Have a good evening." Callen found himself back in the hallway, the pizza still in his bag, $100 in his pocket. The door closed behind him with a soft click. He stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. It had been so easy, so mundane. A package delivered, money exchanged, nothing violent or dramatic. Just a simple transaction, but his hands still shook as he walked down the stairs. He delivered the actual pizza to a confused tenant in apartment 12A who insisted he hadn't ordered anything, then gave it to him for free rather than explain. Back on his motorbike, Callen pulled out the burner phone and texted, "Done." The response came within seconds. "Excellent. Payment delivery tomorrow morning." Callen rode back to Marco's in a daze. The evening rush had started, and he threw himself into work, grateful for the distraction. Orders, deliveries, tips, complaints. All of it normal, all of it safe, all of it a reminder of who he used to be before yesterday. When his shift ended, he picked up Lily from Mrs. Holbrook's apartment. His daughter was drowsy, already in her pajamas, and she wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her home. "Love you, Daddy," she mumbled against his shoulder. "Love you too, baby." Inside their apartment, he tucked her into bed and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. This perfect, innocent person who had no idea what her father had become. He thought about the package he'd delivered, wondered what was in it, wondered what he'd helped facilitate. Money laundering? Drug trafficking? Something worse? "Better you don't know," Paige had said. Callen went to his own room but didn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, he heard something slide under his door. He got up, heart pounding, and found a plain manila envelope on the floor. Inside was cash, 50 $100 bills, counted and bundled with a paper band. $5,000, more money than he'd ever held in his life. He sat on his bed, counting it, the bills crisp and new, and felt tears running down his face. This was blood money, dirty money, wrong money, but it was also rent money, food money, birthday money, future money. It was the difference between drowning and breathing. Callen hid the cash in a loose floorboard under his bed, the same place he used to hide birthday presents where Lily wouldn't find them. Then he lay back down and stared at the ceiling until morning came, knowing he'd just sold a piece of his soul and hating himself for how easy it had been. When Lily woke up and came padding into the kitchen for breakfast, he hugged her tight and promised himself this would be temporary, just enough to get stable, to get ahead, to give her what she needed. Then he'd find a way out. He'd make it right somehow. But even as he made the promise, he knew it was a lie. Sterling had him now. The money had him. The fear had him. There was no getting out, only deeper in. 3 weeks passed like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Callen couldn't quite tell the difference anymore. He made 5 more deliveries. 5 more packages, handed to quiet men in expensive apartments or office buildings after hours. 5 more manila envelopes slipped under his door in the dead of night. $30,000 total, hidden in that floorboard under his bed. More money than he'd earned in the past 2 years combined. And his life changed in ways both big and small. The eviction notice came down from the refrigerator, replaced by a paid receipt. The landlord had been shocked when Callen showed up with 3 months' rent in cash, but he'd taken it without questions. The medical bills from Sarah's treatment got paid. Not all of them. That would have raised suspicion, but enough to stop the collection calls. The electricity bill, the water bill, the phone bill, all current for the first time in memory. Callen bought Lily new shoes. Good ones from an actual shoe store instead of the thrift shop. Ones that fit properly and didn't pinch her toes. He bought her the birthday party she'd tried so hard not to ask for. Cupcakes with frosting, decorations, small gifts for the 3 classmates she invited over. Her face, when she saw it all set up in their small apartment, the pure joy in her eyes, had almost made him forget how he'd paid for it. Almost. He bought himself things too. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, but new jeans that didn't have holes, a winter jacket that actually kept him warm, boots for his motorbike that didn't leak when it rained. Small luxuries that felt enormous after years of going without. Mrs. Holbrook noticed. "You're looking better," she said one evening when he picked up Lily. "Did you get a promotion?" "Something like that," Callen said, hating the lie. Stella noticed too. She cornered him during a slow afternoon at Marco's, her eyes sharp with concern. "That's a nice watch," she said, nodding at his wrist. Callen looked down at the timepiece, nothing too expensive, just a decent watch he'd bought to replace the broken one he'd been wearing. But it was new, and Stella didn't miss details. "Early birthday present to myself," he said. "Your birthday's not until March." "Late birthday present, then." She didn't smile. "Callen, remember what we talked about? About shortcuts?" "I remember. Just be careful, okay? Whatever's going on," he wanted to tell her. Wanted to confess everything, to have someone else carry the weight of what he'd become. But Sterling's warning echoed in his mind. "Don't tell anyone," and the implied threat behind it. "Your daughter's safety depends on your silence. Nothing's going on," he said. "I'm just finally catching a break." Stella held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded and went back to work. But Callen could feel her watching him more closely after that, and it made the knot in his stomach tighten. The deliveries themselves had become routine. The burner phone would buzz with instructions. He'd meet Paige at various locations around the city, parking garages, empty lots, once in the back room of a restaurant that smelled like grease and old cigarettes. She'd hand him a package, give him an address, remind him to follow instructions exactly. He'd deliver it, text confirmation, and wait for his payment. He stopped asking what was in the packages, stopped wondering who he was delivering to or what they did with whatever he brought them. Stopped thinking about it at all, really. It was easier that way. Just a job, just money, just survival. But the ease of it frightened him. How quickly he'd adapted. How normal it had started to feel. One evening, Sterling called him directly. Not a text with instructions, but an actual phone call on the burner phone. Callen answered in the alley behind Marco's, his voice careful. "Hello? Callen, how are you?" Sterling sounded pleased, almost friendly. "I'm fine. I wanted to check in. You've been doing excellent work. No complaints, no mistakes. I'm impressed. Thank you. In fact, I'd like to meet with you. Discuss some opportunities for expanded responsibilities. Are you free tonight? Say 9 o'clock? It wasn't really a question. Where? Sterling gave him an address, a restaurant downtown, the kind with valet parking and prices that would have been laughable to Callen a month ago. I'll have a table reserved. This is a celebration, Callen. You've earned it. The call ended before Callen could respond. He stood in the alley holding the phone, feeling trapped. Expanded responsibilities. That meant more money, probably. But it also meant deeper involvement, more risk, less chance of ever getting out. That night, after dropping Lily at Mrs. Holbrook's apartment, he rode his motorbike downtown and found the restaurant. The valet looked at his worn bike with barely concealed disdain, but Callen ignored it and walked inside. The interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of place where people spoke in quiet voices about business deals and politics. Sterling sat at a corner table, dressed in an expensive suit, a glass of red wine in front of him. He stood when Callen approached, shook his hand warmly, and gestured for him to sit. "You clean up well," Sterling said, noting Callen's attempt at nice clothes, the new jeans, a button-down shirt he'd bought that afternoon. "I don't really fit in here," Callen admitted. "Nonsense. You fit in anywhere I say you fit in." Sterling poured wine into a second glass, slid it across the table. "Drink, relax. Tonight is about recognizing your value." The wine was better than anything Callen had ever tasted, smooth and complex. He sipped it cautiously, while Sterling ordered food for both of them, steaks, sides, appetizers that cost more than Callen used to spend on groceries for a week. "You've adapted well," Sterling said once the waiter left. "Some people struggle with the transition. Guilt, hesitation, second thoughts. But you've been steady, professional. That tells me you understand what's important. My daughter's important." "Exactly." Sterling leaned back, studying him. "Everything we do for the people who depend on us. Society likes to pretend morality is simple, good and bad, right and wrong. But real life is more complicated. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect the ones we love." Callen said nothing, just turned his wine glass in slow circles on the table. "I want to offer you something," Sterling continued. "A bonus, if you will, for your excellent service." He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket and set it on the table. Inside was a watch. Not the simple one Callen had bought, but something expensive, elegant, with a face that caught the light like jewelry. "I can't accept this," Callen said. "Of course you can. You've earned it." Sterling closed the box and pushed it toward him. "Wear it. Let it remind you of what's possible when you make the right choices." The food arrived and they ate. Sterling talked about business, vague references to operations, shipments, clients. He mentioned expansion plans, new territories, opportunities for growth. Callen listened and nodded, but only understood half of what was being said. The criminal world had its own language, its own logic, and he was still learning to speak it. Halfway through the meal, Sterling's tone shifted. "There's been some activity lately. Law enforcement sniffing around the industrial district. Anonymous tips, that sort of thing. Nothing to worry about, but it means we need to be more careful." Callen's stomach dropped. "Police?" They won't find anything. We have, let's call them friends, who help redirect attention when necessary. Sterling smiled. But it does mean we'll be implementing enhanced security protocols. New procedures, new contact methods. Paige will brief you. Okay, the key is to stay calm. Don't change your routine. Don't act suspicious. You're just a pizza delivery driver living his life. Nothing more, nothing less. Easy for Sterling to say. He wasn't the one making deliveries, wasn't the one who would get arrested if something went wrong. But Callen nodded and finished his steak, the meat suddenly tasting like dust in his mouth. After dinner, Sterling walked him to the valet stand and waited while Callen's motorbike was brought around. He clapped Callen on the shoulder like they were old friends. "You're doing good work," he said. "Your daughter is lucky to have a father who cares enough to do what's necessary." The words should have felt like praise. Instead, they felt like accusation. Callen rode home through the dark streets, the expensive watch heavy in his jacket pocket. He picked up Lily, carried her sleeping form back to their apartment, tucked her into bed. Then he sat at the kitchen table and opened the watchbox, studying the timepiece inside. It was beautiful, probably worth thousands of dollars. The kind of thing he'd never have been able to afford in a legitimate lifetime. He put it on his wrist. The weight felt good, solid, real. He looked at his reflection in the darkened window and saw a stranger looking back, someone who wore expensive watches and ate at fancy restaurants and delivered packages for criminals. Someone his wife wouldn't recognize. Someone he barely recognized himself. But the rent was paid. The bills were current. Lily had new shoes and a birthday party and a father who could finally provide. That had to count for something, didn't it? Callen took off the watch and put it in the drawer with the cash from his deliveries. Then he went to bed and lay awake until dawn, listening to his daughter's peaceful breathing from the next room and wondering how much of his soul he'd have to sell before there was nothing left to recognize. The paranoia started small. A car parked on his street that Callen didn't recognize. A man in a coffee shop who seemed to be watching him. The feeling of eyes on his back when he made deliveries. At first, Callen told himself he was being ridiculous. Guilt making him jumpy, nothing more. But the feeling persisted, grew stronger, until he couldn't shake the sensation that someone was following him. After his 7th delivery, a package dropped at a law office after hours, he noticed a dark sedan, 3 cars back on his route home. It stayed with him through 4 turns, maintaining distance, but never quite disappearing. Callen's heart hammered as he made a sudden right turn down a side street. The sedan followed. He gunned the motorbike, weaving through residential streets until he'd lost the tail. When he finally stopped, hands shaking on the handlebars, he pulled out the burner phone and texted Sterling, "Someone following me." The response came quickly, "Come to warehouse, now." 20 minutes later, Callen stood in the same warehouse where this had all started, facing Sterling and a man he hadn't met before. The stranger was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that suggested military training. His eyes were cold and assessing. "This is Desmond Greer," Sterling said. "He handles security for our operations." "Desmond, this is Callen Durant, the courier I told you about." Desmond's handshake was firm enough to hurt. "Tell me about the tale." Callen described the sedan, the route, how he'd lost it. Desmond listened without expression, then pulled out a tablet and made notes. "Could be law enforcement," Desmond said. "Could be a competitor. Could be nothing. I need to know which," Sterling said. "I'll evaluate him. Check for vulnerabilities, tighten protocols." Desmond turned to Callen. "I'll be watching you for the next few days. Don't be alarmed if you see me. I'm there to protect the operation." "Protect the operation," Callen repeated. "Not me." Desmond's smile was thin and humorless. "You are the operation, Durant, which makes you valuable, but only as long as you're useful." He walked closer, invading Callen's personal space. "You have a daughter, 8 years old, attends Lincoln Elementary. Takes the bus, Route 42. That makes you weak. It also makes you controllable." Callen's hands clenched into fists. "Are you threatening my daughter?" "I'm stating facts." Desmond stepped back. "You do your job, follow instructions, keep your mouth shut, and she stays safe. You deviate, you talk, you compromise us, then we have a problem." Sterling held up a hand. That's enough, Desmond. Callen understands the stakes. He turned to Callen with something that might have been sympathy. We're all trying to protect our interests here, your daughter included. Work with us and there's nothing to worry about. But worry was all Callen felt as he left the warehouse that night. The casual mention of Lily's school, her bus route, it wasn't accidental. It was a reminder that they were watching, that they could reach her whenever they wanted. He was trapped, completely and utterly, with no way out that didn't put his daughter in danger. The next few days were a nightmare of hypervigilance. Callen saw Desmond everywhere, across the street when he walked Lily to school, in a parked car near Marco's, standing in the shadows near their apartment building. The man was a ghost, appearing and disappearing without sound, a constant reminder of the cage Callen had built around himself. Stella finally confronted him during a slow afternoon shift. She pulled him into the storage room, closed the door and stood with her arms crossed. "What's going on with you?" she demanded. "Nothing, I'm fine. You're not fine. You're jumping at shadows. You look over your shoulder every 5 seconds. And you're wearing a watch that costs more than my car." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Callen, what did you do?" He wanted to tell her. God, he wanted to tell someone, anyone, to share the weight of what he'd become. But he thought of Desmond's cold eyes, Sterling's veiled threats, and he shook his head. "I can't talk about it. Can't or won't." "Both." Stella's expression shifted from anger to fear. "You're in trouble. Real trouble. I can handle it. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone drowning who's forgotten how to swim." She grabbed his arm. "Whatever it is, there's a way out. There's always a way out." But Callen knew better. He'd seen too much, delivered too many packages, taken too much money. There was no walking away from Sterling's organization. The only way out was through, and he had no idea where through led. That evening, something happened that made everything worse. Lily came home from school with a drawing she'd made in art class. She held it up proudly, a picture of their family, her, Callen, and her mother, all holding hands under a rainbow. "Teacher said we should draw what makes us happy," Lily explained. "I drew us. All together again." Callen stared at the drawing, at Sarah's smiling face rendered in crayon, and felt something break inside him. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Lily asked. "Of how we're doing now?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Would Sarah be proud? Would she be proud of the man he'd become, the choices he'd made, the line he'd crossed? He thought of her in that hospital bed, making him promise to take care of Lily, but she'd meant take care of her honestly, raise her with integrity, be the kind of father their daughter could look up to. Instead, he'd become a criminal, a courier for people who threatened children and operated in shadows. "I think she'd be proud of you," Callen said carefully. "You're doing great in school. You're kind and smart and brave. What about you, Daddy?" "Would she be proud of you?" Callen couldn't answer. He just pulled Lily into a hug and held her while she chattered about her day, about her friends, about ordinary things that felt impossibly far away from the life he was living. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Callen sat at the kitchen table trying to figure out a way forward. He could go to the police, but what would he tell them? He'd been making deliveries for a criminal organization for weeks. He was complicit, guilty, arrestable, and Sterling had connections in law enforcement. Who could he trust? He could run, take Lily and disappear. But where would they go? How would they live? And Sterling would find them eventually. Men like that always did. He could keep going, keep making deliveries, keep pretending this was sustainable. But eventually something would go wrong. He'd get caught, or Sterling would decide he was a liability, or... The burner phone buzzed. Callen stared at it, dreading whatever message waited. Finally, he picked it up and read, "Delivery tonight. Instructions in 10 minutes. This one is important. Don't screw it up." His hands shook as he typed back, "Understood." 10 minutes later, the instructions came through. The address was on the east side, near the docks. The delivery time was midnight, and there was a note at the end. "Police activity in area. Be careful. Abort if compromised." Callen read it 3 times, his stomach churning. Police activity. This was the enhanced security Sterling had mentioned, the increased danger. He should refuse. should text back that he couldn't do it, that the risk was too high. Instead, he checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully, her drawing of their family pinned to the wall above her bed, and got ready to leave. At 11:30, he knocked on Mrs. Holbrook's door. She answered in her nightgown, concerned. "Emergency shift," Callen lied. "I'm sorry to ask, but could you—" "Of course, dear. Send her over." He carried Lily, still sleeping, to Mrs. Holbrook's apartment, then headed out into the night. The east side was industrial, all warehouses and shipping containers and chain-link fences. The address was a building near the water, isolated and dark. Paige met him in an alley 2 blocks away, her face tight with tension. "This is critical," she said, handing him the package. It was larger than usual, heavier. "Get it to the address. The contact will be waiting. If you see police, abort. Leave the package somewhere safe and text the location. Do not get caught with this. What's in it?" Colin asked. "Financial records. Very sensitive financial records. People go to prison if these end up in the wrong hands. Whose hands are the right hands?" Paige's expression was grim. "Not the police." "Now go." Callen took the package and headed toward the address, his nerves screaming. The streets were empty, eerily quiet. He kept checking over his shoulder, expecting to see police cars, Desmond's sedan, something. But there was nothing, just darkness and the distant sound of water lapping against docks. The building was a converted warehouse, half residential lofts, half commercial space. Colin found the unit number and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. The door cracked open. A man looked out, older, nervous, sweating despite the cold. "You're late." "Traffic," Callen lied. The man grabbed the package, started to close the door, then paused. "You know what this is?" "No." "Good. Keep it that way." He shut the door. Callen turned to leave and froze. At the end of the hallway stood a man in a dark jacket watching him. Not Desmond, someone else. The man raised a phone, took a picture, then disappeared down the stairs. Callen's heart hammered as he texted Sterling. "Delivery complete. Someone photographed me." The response came immediately. "Get out of there, now. Meet at warehouse in 1 hour." Callen didn't go straight to the warehouse. First, he circled back to Mrs. Holbrook's apartment, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Someone had photographed him. Someone knew his face, could connect him to whatever criminal operation Sterling was running. That meant danger, not just for him, but for Lily. Mrs. Holbrook answered the door with a finger to her lips. "She's sleeping on the couch. Didn't want to move her to the bedroom." "I need to take her home," Callen said, trying to keep his voice steady. "At this hour? Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. I need her home." He carried Lily back to their apartment, tucked her into her own bed, and stood in the doorway watching her breathe. Whatever happened next, whatever consequences came from tonight, he needed her safe. He locked every window, checked every door, then forced himself to leave for the warehouse. Sterling was waiting inside with Desmond and Paige. All 3 looked tense. And the warehouse felt different, darker, more threatening. The luxury cars were gone, the cash pallets missing. Just empty space and shadows. "Tell me exactly what happened," Sterling said without preamble. Callen described the delivery, the nervous contact, the man who'd photographed him. Sterling and Desmond exchanged glances. "Description," Desmond demanded. 40s, maybe. Dark jacket, jeans, average height, clean-shaven. He was fast, took the picture and disappeared before I could react. Desmond pulled out his tablet, scrolled through files, then turned it to show Callen a photo. "This him?" Callen's stomach dropped. The man in the photo was the same one from the hallway. "Yes, who is he?" "Detective Louis Shepard, Major Crimes Division." Desmond's voice was flat, emotionless. "He's been investigating our operations for 6 months." The words hit Callen like a punch. "A detective. He'd been photographed by a police detective during a delivery. I'm going to be arrested. Not if we handle this correctly," Sterling said. He paced the warehouse floor, thinking. Shepard's working outside official channels. If he had enough evidence for arrests, he'd have made them already. He's building a case, collecting information, which means Durant is now a liability, Desmond said, looking at Callen like he was a problem to be solved. "I didn't do anything wrong," Callen protested. "I just delivered a package." I don't even know what was in it. Plausible deniability, Page said. That protects you legally. But it doesn't protect the operation. Sterling stopped pacing. We need to know what Shepard knows. Who he's talked to, what evidence he's collected, whether Durant's the only courier he's identified. He turned to Desmond. I want surveillance on Shepard. 24 hours. Find out if he's working alone or if he's reported up the chain. And Durant, Desmond asked, stays active. Business as usual. If he suddenly disappears or changes behavior, it confirms guilt. Sterling looked at Callen. You continue making deliveries. You act like nothing happened. Can you do that? Callen wanted to scream that no, he couldn't, that he wanted out, that he'd made a terrible mistake. But Desmond's cold eyes reminded him that wanting out wasn't an option. I can do that. Good. Sterling moved closer. This situation is manageable. Stay calm, follow instructions, and we'll all get through it. But Callen felt anything but calm as he left the warehouse. A detective knew his face. The police were investigating. Everything was unraveling, and he was caught in the middle, with no way to protect himself or his daughter. He rode home through empty streets, exhaustion and fear making his hands shake on the handlebars. Inside the apartment, he checked on Lily again, still sleeping, peaceful, unaware, then collapsed into bed without undressing. Sleep didn't come. His mind spun through scenarios, each worse than the last. Arrest, prison, Lily in foster care, Sterling deciding he was too much of a risk, Desmond making him disappear. Every possibility ended in disaster. At dawn, he gave up on sleep and made coffee. The burner phone buzzed with new instructions. Another delivery tonight, a different location. Business as usual, just like Sterling had said. Callen stared at the message and felt the cage closing tighter around him. The day passed in a fog. Breakfast with Lily, who chatted about a science project while Callen nodded mechanically. The walk to the bus stop, where he studied every car, every face, looking for Detective Shepard or Desmond or anyone else watching. Work at Marco's, where Stella avoided him after their conversation yesterday, her concern replaced by distance. That evening, Callen made the delivery as instructed. A package to an office building downtown, handed to a man in an expensive suit who barely looked at him. Simple, smooth, professional. But every shadow felt threatening. Every passing car could be police. When he got home, there was an envelope under his door. Not the usual payment envelope, something different. Smaller, lighter. Callen opened it with trembling hands and found a USB drive inside, along with a handwritten note. You deserve to know the truth. Meet me tomorrow noon, Riverside Park. Come alone. Isris Ah. His mind raced through possibilities. Not Sterling, wrong initials. Not Desmond or Page, someone else. Someone who knew where he lived, knew about the operation, had information they thought he needed. It could be a trap. Could be Detective Shepard trying to flip him, turn him into an informant. Could be Sterling testing his loyalty. But the note said truth, and Callen realized he'd been operating in darkness for weeks, making deliveries without knowing what he was really part of. He looked at the USB drive, wanted to plug it into his laptop immediately, but paranoia stopped him. What if it contained malware? What if it was traceable? Instead, he hid it in his pocket and tried to sleep. The next morning, after dropping Lily at school, Callen called in sick to Marco's. Vincent sounded concerned, but didn't press. At 11:30, Callen rode his motorbike to Riverside Park, checking constantly for tails, for surveillance, for anything suspicious. The park was busy with lunch crowds, office workers on break, parents with strollers, joggers on the paths. Callen found a bench near the river and waited, the USB drive heavy in his pocket. At exactly noon, someone sat down beside him. Callen turned, expecting a stranger. It was Stella. Don't react, she said quietly, staring straight ahead at the river. Don't look at me. Just listen, Callen's mind reeled. You sent the drive? My brother worked for Sterling. Kyle Rivendell. He was a courier just like you. 6 months ago, he started asking questions about what he was delivering. Started having doubts. Her voice was steady but edged with pain. 3 weeks later, he disappeared. Police ruled it a missing person case. No body, no evidence, nothing. Stella, I got a job at Marco's to investigate, to find out what happened to Kyle. I've been watching Sterling's operation, documenting everything, trying to understand who's involved. She finally turned to look at him, and her eyes were fierce. You're not the first courier, Callen, and you won't be the last. Unless someone stops this. What's on the drive? Everything I've collected. Financial records, delivery logs, connections to a cartel operation running through the city. Sterling's not just redistributing stolen goods. He's laundering money for the Vasquez cartel. Millions of dollars. And the couriers like you and Kyle. You're moving evidence, bribes, sometimes product. You're complicit in everything they do. Callen felt sick. A cartel. He'd been working for a cartel operation. All those packages, all that money. It was blood money, connected to violence and drugs and death. The USB has proof, Stella continued. Enough to take down Sterling and everyone connected to him. But I need your help. I need you to gather more evidence, document deliveries, record conversations. And then we go to the police together. Sterling has people in the police. He said, not everyone. There's an FBI agent, someone I trust. We can bypass local corruption, go straight to federal authorities. She stood up, preparing to leave. Think about it, but think fast. Detective Shepard is closing in, and when he moves, everyone goes down, including you. Unless you help bring them down first. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Callen sat frozen on the bench, his world completely upended. That evening, alone in his apartment while Lily slept, he plugged the USB drive into his laptop with shaking hands. Files opened, spreadsheets, photographs, documentation of Sterling's entire operation. Names, dates, amounts, and a folder labeled Retired Couriers. 9 names, including Kyle Rivendell. 9 people who'd worked for Sterling and then vanished. The last file was a video. Callen clicked it and watched a man speak directly to the camera, gaunt, frightened, recording what looked like a final testimony. My name is Kyle Rivendell. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. Sterling Voss runs a money laundering operation for the Vasquez cartel. He uses couriers like me to move evidence and bribes. When we become liabilities, we disappear. Don't trust him. Don't believe his promises. Get out while you can. The video ended. Callen sat in the darkness, understanding finally settling over him like a weight. He'd been naive, desperate, stupid. He'd thought he was delivering packages for some kind of theft ring, maybe insurance fraud. He'd never imagined cartels, never imagined the scale of what he'd become part of. And now he had a choice. Keep working for Sterling and hope he didn't end up like Kyle. Or help Stella bring the whole operation down and hope the FBI could protect him and Lily from the fallout. Callen didn't sleep. He watched Kyle Rivendell's video 3 more times, studied the files on the USB drive until his eyes burned, and understood with absolute clarity that he was a dead man walking. The only question was whether he'd die as Sterling's disposable courier or as someone who'd tried to do the right thing. By morning, he'd made his decision. He got Lily ready for school like always. Oatmeal, backpack, the walk to the bus stop. But this time, he hugged her longer, memorized her face with desperate intensity. If this went wrong, if Sterling found out what he was planning, this might be the last normal morning they'd ever have. Dad, you're squishing me. Lily laughed, squirming in his arms. Sorry, sweetheart. Just, I love you. You know that, right? She looked up at him with those perceptive brown eyes. I know, are you okay? You seem sad again. I'm going to make things better, he promised. I'm going to fix everything. After the bus left, Callen went to the 24-hour copy shop 3 blocks from their apartment. He made duplicates of everything on the USB drive, stored copies in different locations, one in a safe deposit box he opened that morning, one mailed to himself at Marco's, one hidden in Mrs. Holbrook's apartment building in a storage locker he rented under a fake name, insurance. If anything happened to him, the evidence would still exist. Then he called Stella from a payphone. I'm in. Tell me what you need me to do. They met that afternoon in a different park far from Riverside. Stella brought someone with her, a woman in her late 30s, dressed casually but with an intensity that marked her as law enforcement. "This is Agent Denise Calloway," Stella said quietly. "FBI. She's been investigating the Vasquez cartel's operations in this region. She's the one I've been working with." Agent Calloway studied Callen with sharp, assessing eyes. "Stella tells me you want to help bring down Sterling Voss." "I want to protect my daughter," Callen said. "If that means bringing down Sterling, then yes, understood. Here's what I need from you." Calloway pulled out a folder, handed him documents. "Continue making deliveries, but now you wear a wire. Record every conversation, every meeting, every instruction. We need Sterling on tape discussing the cartel, discussing money laundering, and most importantly, discussing what happened to previous couriers." Callen's hands shook as he looked at the paperwork: witness protection agreements, immunity deals, FBI protocols. "If he finds out, he won't. The wire is sophisticated, undetectable, and we'll have teams nearby during every delivery." Calloway's voice softened slightly. "I know you're scared, but you're doing the right thing, and we will protect you and your daughter." "What about Desmond?" "Sterling's enforcer. He watches me constantly. We know about Greer. He's former military dishonorable discharge, works as muscle for various criminal operations. He's dangerous, but he's not omniscient." Calloway pulled out more photos, surveillance shots of Sterling, Page, Desmond, others Callen didn't recognize. "This organization is big, but it's not invincible. Help us build the case, and we'll dismantle it completely." Callen signed the papers with a pen that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Witness protection, immunity from prosecution, a new life somewhere far from here, with a new name, new identity. Everything familiar would disappear, but Lily would be safe." That was all that mattered. They spent the next 2 hours training him. How to activate the wire, how to steer conversations toward incriminating topics, what to do if he felt compromised. Calloway gave him a panic phrase. "I need to know the truth about what happened to the others, that would signal her team to move in immediately. Use it only as a last resort," she warned. "Once we move, the operation is over. We need as much evidence as possible before that happens." Stella stayed with him after Calloway left. They sat on a bench, watching clouds move across the sky. Two people whose lives had been torn apart by Sterling's organization. "Why didn't you tell me?" Callen asked. "When I first started, you could have warned me. Would you have believed me? You were desperate, scared, focused on survival. You had to see it yourself, had to understand what you'd become part of." She turned to him. "I'm sorry for not stopping you sooner, for watching you go down the same path Kyle did. It's not your fault. Maybe not. But I could have done more." She pulled out a photo from her wallet, her and Kyle, both younger, both smiling at some family gathering. "He was a good person who made bad choices for good reasons. Just like you. I won't let Sterling destroy another family." That evening, Callen picked up Lily from school and took her to Mrs. Holbrook's apartment earlier than usual. "I might be working late for the next few nights," he told the elderly woman. "Some big projects at Marco's." Mrs. Holbrook agreed readily, happy for the company. Lily settled in with her homework, and Callen kissed her forehead, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo one more time. "Be good," he said. "Always am," she replied, already absorbed in her math problems. At Marco's, Vincent noticed his tension. "You sure you're okay to work tonight? You've seemed off lately." "I'm fine. Just some personal stuff." "I'll be fine." The burner phone buzzed at 7 o'clock. "Delivery tonight. 10 p.m. warehouse, important meeting." "Be there." Callen texted Stella the information. She responded immediately. "Agent Calloway is briefing the team now. You'll get the wire at 9 p.m. Location to follow." The hours crawled by. Regular deliveries, regular customers, the familiar rhythm of work. But underneath, Callen's heart hammered with fear and adrenaline. Tonight, everything changed. Tonight, he'd either bring down Sterling's organization or die trying. At 9 o'clock, he met Calloway in a parking garage downtown. She was with 2 other agents, technical specialists who fitted him with the wire, a device so small it was almost invisible, hidden in the seam of his jacket. "It's voice-activated," the tech explained. "Starts recording when you speak. Battery lasts 8 hours. If anything happens, if you need help, say the panic phrase, and we'll be there in under 2 minutes. Where will you be?" Callen asked. "Surveillance van, 2 blocks from the warehouse." "Out of sight, but close enough to respond." Calloway handed him an earpiece, nearly invisible. "Wear this. We can hear you, and if absolutely necessary, we can communicate with you. But don't expect conversation, only emergency instructions." Callen put in the earpiece, tested the wire. His own voice came back through a speaker, clear, perfect. "Evidence quality. Remember," Calloway said, "get Sterling talking about the cartel, about money laundering, about what happens to couriers who become problems. We need him to incriminate himself completely." "Can you do that?" Callen thought of Kyle Rivendale's video, of the 9 names in the retired couriers folder, of Lily sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Holbrook's apartment. "I can do that." He rode his motorbike to the warehouse, arriving at exactly 10 o'clock. The building was lit from inside, and he could see shadows moving. Sterling, definitely, and probably Desmond and Page, maybe others. Callen killed the engine, climbed off the bike, and stood for a moment, gathering courage. This was it, the moment where he either saved himself and Lily or destroyed them both. He thought of Sarah, wished she was here to tell him he was doing the right thing. Then he walked toward the warehouse, toward whatever waited inside, and prayed the FBI was as good as they claimed to be. Sterling stood in the center of the warehouse, Desmond and Page flanking him. But something was wrong. The atmosphere felt different, colder, more dangerous. And Sterling's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Callen," he said warmly, "come in. We need to talk." Callen stepped inside and heard the door close behind him. He glanced back. Another man stood there, someone he didn't recognize, blocking the exit, his heart hammered. They knew. Somehow they knew. "You've been doing excellent work," Sterling continued, walking slowly around Callen like a predator circling prey. "Very professional, very reliable, which is why what I'm about to ask makes me so disappointed." "I don't understand," Callen said, trying to keep his voice steady. Sterling stopped in front of him. "You met with someone today in a park. A woman and another person, someone who doesn't belong in your world." His smile vanished. "Tell me, Callen, who were they?" Desmond's hand moved to his jacket, where Callen knew he kept a gun. The wire felt like it was burning against his skin, recording every word, transmitting everything to Calloway's team. But would they reach him in time? "I don't know what you're talking about," Callen said. "Don't lie to me." Sterling's voice dropped to something deadly. "I've been very patient with you. I've given you opportunities, money, a better life. And this is how you repay me? By talking to federal agents?" The panic phrase rose to Callen's lips. "I need to know the truth about what happened to the others." But before he could speak, Desmond moved behind him and grabbed his jacket. Searching roughly. "He's wearing something," Desmond said, finding the wire. He ripped it free, held it up to the light. "Recording device. FBI issue." Sterling's expression turned to ice. "And you stupid, stupid man. You've just signed your own death warrant." Callen's mind raced. The wire was destroyed, but it had been transmitting. Calloway's team had heard everything. They were coming. He just had to stay alive long enough for them to arrive. "I can explain," Callen said, raising his hand slowly. "Explain what?" Sterling's voice was cold fury. "How you betrayed us. How you've been working with the FBI. How you've compromised years of carefully built operations." Desmond pulled a gun from his jacket, the metal catching the warehouse lights. Behind Callen, the other man blocked the door. Page stood to the side, her face pale but expressionless. "Sterling, listen," Callen started. "No, you listen." Sterling stepped closer, his finger jabbing toward Callen's chest. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "The people I answer to don't forgive mistakes like this. The Vasquez cartel doesn't show mercy to informants." There it was. Sterling had said it. The cartel, on record, before Desmond destroyed the wire. Callen had gotten what the FBI needed. Now he just had to survive. "I never told them anything important," Callen lied desperately. "They approached me after Detective Shepard photographed me. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, so you decided to wear a wire to a meeting with me?" Sterling's laugh was bitter. "Do you think I'm an idiot? I was trying to protect my daughter, your daughter." Sterling's expression shifted to something calculating. Yes, let's talk about Lily. Where is she right now, Callen? Ice flooded Callen's veins. Leave her out of this. She's at Mrs. Holbrook's apartment, isn't she? 3 doors down from yours. Unit 4C. Sterling pulled out his phone. One call and Desmond's associates pay her a visit. Maybe they take her somewhere safe while we sort this out. Or maybe don't. The word came out raw, desperate. Please, she's 8 years old. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. She's your weakness. The reason you're here, the reason you made these choices. Sterling held up his phone. Tell me everything you told the FBI. Every detail, every name, every piece of evidence. Do that and maybe your daughter stays safe. Callen's mind spun. He thought of Lily at Mrs. Holbrook's doing homework, unaware of the danger. Thought of Kyle Rivendale's video, the 9 retired couriers who'd vanished. Thought of Sarah's face in that hospital bed, making him promise to protect their daughter. I need to know the truth about what happened to the others, Callen said clearly, the panic phrase finally leaving his lips. Sterling's eyes narrowed. What? The other couriers? Kyle Rivendale. The 9 people before me. I need to know what happened to them before I tell you anything. Desmond raised the gun, pointing it at Callen's chest. You're not making demands here, Durant. But Sterling held up a hand, studying Callen with sudden interest. You want the truth? Fine. They're dead. All of them. We used them until they became liabilities, until they knew too much or asked too many questions. Then we retired them permanently. His voice was matter-of-fact, like discussing business logistics. Kyle Rivendale lasted longer than most, 9 months. But eventually he got curious, started investigating, became a problem. Desmond handled it. The confession hung in the air. It was what Calloway needed. Sterling admitting to multiple murders, connecting himself directly to the deaths. But the wire was destroyed. Unless, Callen realized, the earpiece was still in his ear. Still active. Still transmitting. The FBI was hearing everything. How long? Callen asked, stalling for time. How long before you plan to kill me? Another month, maybe 2. Long enough to complete the current operations, short enough that you wouldn't become too problematic. Sterling shrugged. You were useful, Callen, but everyone has an expiration date. The words confirmed what Callen had suspected but hoped wasn't true. He'd never been safe. The money, the promises, the watch, all of it was temporary. He'd been dead the moment he agreed to that first delivery. And now? Callen asked. Now you've accelerated the timeline. Sterling nodded to Desmond. We'll deal with the FBI later. First we clean up this mess. Desmond's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward. FBI. Drop your weapons. Agents poured through the entrance, tactical gear, rifles raised, shouting commands. Desmond spun toward them, his gun still trained on Callen. Sterling dove behind a metal container. Paige raised her hands immediately, surrendering, dropped the weapon. An agent shouted at Desmond. Everything happened at once. Desmond fired, not at the agents, but at Callen. The bullet whined past his ear as he threw himself to the ground. Return fire erupted from the FBI agents, deafening in the enclosed space. Callen covered his head, feeling bullets snap through the air above him. More shots, shouting, the sound of bodies hitting concrete. Then silence, broken only by ringing ears and heavy breathing. Callen looked up. Desmond lay on the ground, clutching his shoulder, his gun kicked away by an agent. Sterling was on his knees, hands behind his head, 3 agents surrounding him. Paige stood against the wall, already in handcuffs, crying quietly. Agent Calloway appeared, pulling Callen to his feet. You okay? I think so. His legs shook, adrenaline making everything feel unreal. The earpiece kept transmitting after they found the wire. We got everything. The cartel admission, the confession about the couriers, the threat against your daughter. It's all recorded. She squeezed his shoulder. You did good, Callen. You did really good. Agents were reading Sterling his rights, hauling him toward the door. As he passed Callen, Sterling's eyes were full of cold hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. The cartel doesn't forget. Neither does the FBI, Calloway replied. And you're going to help us bring them down too, or you'll die in prison. Sterling was dragged away, still screaming threats. Desmond was loaded onto a stretcher, under guard. Paige went quietly, her cooperation already beginning. Callen stood in the empty warehouse, surrounded by federal agents, and felt the weight of weeks lift from his shoulders. It was over. Finally over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. We need to secure your daughter, Calloway said, already moving toward the warehouse exit. Sterling made a call before we breached. We have to assume someone's on their way to Mrs. Holbrook's apartment. The words hit Callen like ice water. How long ago? 2 minutes, maybe 3. Callen ran. Out of the warehouse, to his motorbike, Calloway and 2 other agents racing to their vehicles behind him. He kicked the engine to life and tore through the streets, traffic laws meaningless. The only thought in his mind was Lily. Get to Lily. Keep her safe. The ride that normally took 15 minutes took 7. Callen abandoned the motorbike in the middle of the street and sprinted toward his building. Taking the stairs 3 at a time, Mrs. Holbrook's door, 4C, stood slightly ajar. His heart stopped. He pushed through, and the scene inside made his blood run cold. A man stood in the living room, large, tattooed, nothing like the elderly woman's usual visitors. He had his phone out, was speaking in rapid Spanish. On the couch, Lily sat frozen with fear, Mrs. Holbrook beside her with her arm around the child, protectively. The man turned when Callen entered. His hand moved toward his jacket. "Don't," Callen said, his voice deadly calm despite the terror coursing through him. "Don't you dare, you Durant." The man asked in accented English, "I am." "Let them go." "Can't do that. I got orders." "The girl comes with me." "Over my dead body." The man smiled without humor. "That can be arranged." His hand was almost to his jacket when Calloway and the other agents burst through the door behind Callen, weapons drawn. Federal agents. "Hands where we can see them." The man froze, calculating. For a moment, Callen thought he'd go for his weapon anyway, thought bullets would fly with his daughter just feet away. But the man slowly raised his hands, and the agents swarmed him, forcing him to the ground. Cuffing him, Callen ran to Lily. She launched herself into his arms, sobbing, and he held her so tight he was afraid he'd hurt her. But he couldn't let go, couldn't stop shaking, couldn't process how close he'd come to losing her. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I've got you." "You're safe." Mrs. Holbrook sat on the couch, pale and trembling. He just came in. Said he was looking for someone. Then he saw Lily and..." She couldn't finish. An agent helped Mrs. Holbrook to her feet, led her to the kitchen to take her statement. Another agent escorted the tattooed man out in handcuffs. Calloway crouched in front of Callen and Lily, her voice gentle. "We need to get you both somewhere safe. Tonight, right now." Callen looked around the apartment. Mrs. Holbrook's modest furniture. The TV still playing some game show. Lily's homework spread across the coffee table. Normal life, interrupted by violence. Because of his choices. "Where?" he asked. "Safe house. Federal protection until we can process all the arrests and secure the witnesses. Could be a few days, could be a few weeks." Calloway stood. "Pack what you need." 5 minutes. Callen carried Lily back to their apartment, her face buried in his shoulder. Inside, everything looked the same. The kitchen where they ate oatmeal, the couch where she did homework, her drawings on the refrigerator. Their life, about to be packed into a bag and left behind. He grabbed clothes, toiletries, Lily's favorite stuffed animal. She watched him from the doorway, silent now, her eyes too old for 8 years. "Dad, what's happening?" she finally asked. Callen knelt in front of her, took her hands in his. "I made some bad choices, sweetheart. I was trying to help us, to give you a better life, but I did it the wrong way. And now we have to go somewhere safe for a little while, until the police make sure the bad people can't hurt us. Are you in trouble?" "Yes, but I'm fixing it. I promise. Is Mom disappointed in you?" The question broke something in his chest. He thought of Sarah, of her gentle strength, of the way she'd believed in doing right even when it was hard. "Probably. But I'm trying to make her proud again." Lily hugged him. "I'm not disappointed. You're still the best dad." Callen held her, tears streaming down his face. "I love you so much, Lily. Everything I did, it was for you. Even the bad things. I need you to understand that." "I understand, Daddy." But she couldn't. She was 8. How could she understand the weight of desperation, the terrible calculus of wrong choices made for right reasons? Maybe someday she would. Maybe someday she'd have a daughter of her own and understand the lengths a parent would go to keep their child safe. Calloway appeared in the doorway. Time to go. They were escorted to an unmarked vehicle, Lily clutching her stuffed animal, Callen carrying their hastily packed bags. As they drove away from the apartment building, Callen looked back at the only home Lily had ever known, wondered when, or if, they'd return. The safe house was 40 minutes outside the city, a nondescript suburban home, with agents stationed outside and inside. It had bedrooms, a kitchen, all the basics. But it felt like a cage, even a comfortable one. Calloway sat with them at the kitchen table, explained what came next. Trials, testimony, witness protection might not be necessary after all. With Sterling, Desmond, and multiple cartel associates in custody, the organization was crippled. But there would be hearings, depositions, months of legal proceedings. "You'll be compensated," Calloway said. "Witness fees, plus you're eligible for relocation assistance if needed. Not a fortune, but enough to start over somewhere new if that's what you want." "What about charges against me?" Callen asked. "I made those deliveries. I took that money. You're covered under the immunity agreement. As long as you testify fully and honestly, you won't be prosecuted." She paused. "You did the right thing, Callen. Not at first, maybe. But in the end, when it mattered, you chose right." After Calloway left, Callen tucked Lily into bed in the safe house's spare room. She looked small in the unfamiliar bed, her stuffed animal clutched tight. "Will we go home soon?" she asked. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe, or maybe we'll find a new home. Would that be okay?" She thought about it. "As long as we're together, always. I promise." She fell asleep quickly, exhausted by fear and confusion. Callen sat beside her bed, watching her breathe, and thought about Kyle Rivendell's video, about the 9 couriers who hadn't survived, about how close he'd come to being number 10, but he'd survived. They both had, and tomorrow he'd start the long process of making things right, testifying, helping the FBI dismantle what remained of Sterling's operation, trying to rebuild some version of the life he'd nearly destroyed. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't erase what he'd done, but it was a start. 3 months later, Callen stood outside Marco's Pizza wearing a clean uniform, the familiar red polo and black pants that had once represented the bottom of his life. Now they represented something different: honest work, integrity regained, a life lived in the light instead of shadows. The trials were over. Sterling Voss had been sentenced to life in prison without parole for racketeering, money laundering, and 9 counts of murder. Desmond Greer got 25 years. Paige Whitmore, who'd cooperated fully, received a reduced sentence of 8 years. The Vasquez cartel's operations in the region had been dismantled, dozens of arrests made, millions in assets seized. Callen's testimony had been crucial. He'd spent weeks in depositions, faced Sterling in court, told the whole ugly truth about the deliveries, the money, his own complicity. The immunity agreement had protected him from prosecution, but nothing protected him from the shame of admitting what he'd become. The media had called him a hero. Callen knew better. Heroes didn't take blood money. Heroes didn't wait until they had no choice before doing the right thing. He was just a man who'd made terrible mistakes and somehow survived long enough to fix them. Vincent Caruso had kept his job open. When Callen called asking if he could come back, Vincent's response had been simple: "Everyone deserves a second chance. Be here Monday morning." So here he was, back where he'd started, back to delivering pizzas for minimum wage plus tips. The FBI's witness compensation had helped, enough to catch up on bills and put some money aside for Lily's future. But Callen had donated most of it to organizations that helped families affected by cartel violence. He couldn't keep money connected to that world. Even indirectly, the apartment was the same. Mrs. Holbrook still lived 3 doors down, though she'd been shaken by the incident and now kept her door locked always. She still watched Lily sometimes, still traded babysitting for pizza, their friendship rebuilt on honesty this time. Stella worked at Marco's still too. She'd gotten closure about Kyle. His remains had been found based on Paige's cooperation, and she'd been able to give him a proper burial. They'd become close friends, bonded by shared trauma and survival. She understood what he'd been through in ways no one else could. "You ready for this?" Stella asked as Callen tied on his apron. "As ready as I'll ever be. It's good to have you back." The new guy Vincent hired couldn't find his way across town with GPS and a prayer. Callen smiled. It felt good to smile without guilt weighing it down. "Happy to help." The day passed in comfortable routine. Orders, deliveries, the familiar streets and neighborhoods. Customers who barely looked at him, who didn't know he'd testified against a cartel operation, who just wanted their pizza delivered hot and fast. Anonymous again, invisible in all the right ways. At 3 o'clock he picked up Lily from school. She ran to him across the playground, backpack bouncing, and he caught her in a hug. 9 years old now, growing so fast it made his heart ache. "How was your day?" he asked. "Good. We're reading this really cool book about dragons, and I got an A on my math test." She showed him the paper marked with a gold star. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." They walked home together, Lily chattering about her friends, her teacher, the science fair coming up. Normal things, beautiful things. The kind of conversation that wouldn't be possible if he'd kept making those deliveries. Kept working for Sterling, kept pretending the money was worth the cost. At home, Callen made dinner, spaghetti, nothing fancy, but made with care. They ate at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd counted blood money months ago. Now it just held homework and a vase with cheap flowers he'd bought at the corner store. After dinner, Lily did her homework while Callen reviewed the bills. Tight, always tight, but manageable. No eviction notices, no collection calls. Just the normal struggle of working-class life, and somehow that felt like victory. Before bed, Lily brought him something, a drawing she'd made in art class. It showed the two of them holding hands with the sun shining overhead. At the bottom, in her careful handwriting, "My hero, Dad." Callen felt his throat tighten. "Sweetheart, I'm not a hero. You are to me. You kept us safe. You did the right thing even when it was scary." She hugged him tight. "That's what heroes do." Maybe she was right. Maybe redemption wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about fixing them when you did. About choosing right when wrong would be easier. About protecting what mattered most, even at great cost. He tucked Lily into bed, kissed her forehead, and watched her fall asleep with the peaceful expression of a child who felt safe. That was worth more than all the money Sterling had offered. Worth more than luxury cars and expensive watches and the illusion of an easy life. Later, Callen stood at his window looking out at the city lights, thinking about the journey from that stormy night at the warehouse to this quiet evening. He thought about Kyle Rivendell, about the 8 other couriers who hadn't survived, about the choice between easy money and hard integrity. His phone buzzed, his regular phone, not a burner. A text from Vincent, "Good work today. See you tomorrow." Another day of honest work, of being present for his daughter, of living a life he didn't have to hide. Another day of being the man Sarah had believed he could be. Callen looked at his reflection in the dark window. The expensive watch was long gone, returned to the FBI as evidence. His clothes were thrift store, his motorbike still leaked oil, his bank account was barely above zero. But the face looking back at him was one he recognized again. One he could stand to see. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you need to go. Sometimes losing everything means finding what truly matters. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose integrity when the world offers you everything else. Callen turned from the window, checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping, still safe, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring another shift at Marco's, more deliveries, more ordinary struggles. But they would be his struggles, faced honestly without compromise, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.